Imagine a world where fire wasn't just a tool for cooking or keeping warm, but the key to a technological revolution. Now, picture the first humans discovering that when certain blue and green rocks were heated, they transformed into a brilliant, malleable metal, copper. This is how, more than 10,000 years ago, humanity took its first step toward mastering metals and forever changing the course of history. Copper was the first metal ever utilized by humans, marking the beginning of the Metal Age. Its discovery wasn't merely a technological advancement, it was a true revolution that enabled the creation of more efficient tools, more powerful weapons, and more sophisticated art objects. The ripple effects of this discovery would reshape human society in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. But how exactly did our ancestors discover and master this technology? What secrets did they uncover through trial and error? And what profound impact did this have on the first human societies? These are the fascinating questions we'll explore today. Did you know that some of the earliest copper artifacts date back to around 7,000 years before Christ? Archaeologists have found copper beads in ancient Mesopotamia and Turkey that were crafted by hammering naturally occurring pure copper. Just imagine someone holding a strange green rock near a fire, witnessing it transform, and then realizing they could shape this new material into something useful. That moment of discovery must have seemed like pure magic. The mastery of copper didn't happen overnight. It took generations of ancient craftsmen experimenting with different techniques to perfect the art of extracting and working with this revolutionary material. These early metallurgists were the scientists of their day, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge through careful observation and bold experimentation. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great ancient empires, hit that like button, subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel, and make sure you don't miss a single episode. Join us on this journey through time as we discover how a simple metal changed everything we know about human civilization. It all began with a simple yet brilliant observation. The first humans noticed that when they heated certain green or bluish rocks in their fire pits, something extraordinary happened. These stones released a shining, malleable metal. This wasn't just any metal, but copper, a material that would transform human capability forever. These special rocks, which we now call copper ores, weren't found everywhere. They appeared in specific regions like the Middle East and the Balkans, where the earliest copper workshops have been discovered by archaeologists. Imagine ancient settlements in places like modern-day Turkey, Iran, and Serbia, where people stumbled upon these colorful stones and, through curiosity or perhaps by accident, placed them in their fires. The discovery wasn't planned. It was a fortunate accident that would alter humanity's destiny. Think about it. Someone, somewhere around 9,000 years ago, might have used these colorful stones to ring a cooking fire, only to wake the next morning and find droplets of shiny metal in the ashes. What must have gone through their mind? Surprise? Wonder? Or perhaps they saw the potential immediately. Some of the oldest copper artifacts we've discovered come from the ancient city of Çatalhöyük in Turkey, dating back to the 7th millennium before Christ. Remarkable copper beads, pins, and small tools show that these early metalworkers quickly learned to hammer and shape their new discovery. Here's something fascinating. Did you know that copper was so valuable in ancient times that it was used as currency? In some societies, copper was actually more precious than gold. The ancient Egyptians referred to copper as the eternal metal and believed it had magical properties. They weren't entirely wrong. The antimicrobial properties of copper make it naturally resistant to bacteria, something we've only scientifically proven in modern times. In ancient Cyprus, copper was so abundant that the island's name actually comes from the Latin word for copper, cuprum. The connection was so strong that the ancient Romans eventually named the metal after the island. Cyprus became one of the wealthiest regions of the ancient Mediterranean world, all thanks to this reddish-brown metal that emerged from heated stones. The knowledge of copper working spread slowly across ancient civilizations, traveling along with traders, migrants, and perhaps even early raiders. As it spread from the Middle East to Europe, Africa, and Asia, each culture developed its own techniques and traditions for working with this revolutionary material. What started as a chance discovery in a simple fire pit would ultimately change the course of human history forever. To extract copper, our ancestors used techniques that were rudimentary yet remarkably ingenious. Imagine yourself transported back 6,000 years to an ancient mining site. You'd see men and women digging shallow pits into hillsides with stone tools and antler picks, searching for those telltale blue and green rocks that signaled copper ore. These early miners knew exactly what to look for. Malachite with its brilliant green color or azurite with its deep blue hue. They learned to follow veins of these colored minerals into the earth, sometimes creating tunnels that extended hundreds of feet into mountainsides. Once they gathered enough ore, they didn't have fancy equipment or modern machinery. They had fire, lots of fire. They built specially designed pit furnaces, lining them with clay to withstand the intense heat. These weren't ordinary campfires. They were carefully constructed to reach temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. How did they achieve such heat without modern technology? They used simple but effective bellows made from animal skins to force air into the flames, creating a superheated environment. When placed in these roaring furnaces, something magical happened to the ore. The intense heat caused the copper to separate from the impurities, creating a pure, usable metal. This process, known as smelting, was the first step toward metallurgy as we know it today. It was literally the moment when the Stone Age began to transform into the Metal Age. Did you know that we've found evidence of these ancient smelting operations across the ancient world? At archaeological sites in modern-day Jordan and Israel, researchers have discovered slag heaps, the leftover waste material from copper smelting, dating back more than 5,000 years. Some of these ancient industrial sites were massive operations that would have employed hundreds of workers. The discovery of these techniques wasn't immediate. It represented generations of ancient scientists experimenting with different methods. Think about it. Someone had to realize that different types of wood produced different heat levels. Someone had to figure out that blowing air into the fire made it hotter. Someone had to notice that adding certain materials to the furnace made the copper flow more easily. In ancient Mesopotamia, they eventually developed specialized furnaces with separate chambers, one for the fire and one for the ore, connected by channels that allowed the molten copper to flow downward and collect in clay vessels. This innovation greatly improved the efficiency of copper production and allowed for larger-scale operations. The smoke and fumes from these early foundries would have been intense and dangerous. Modern archaeologists studying the remains of ancient metalworkers often find evidence of lung disease and metal poisoning in their skeletal remains. These early copper workers were truly pioneers who sacrificed much to develop this revolutionary technology that would change human history forever. But the work didn't stop at extraction. Once our ancestors had this glowing, reddish-brown metal, they faced another challenge. Copper needed to be shaped to become useful. The raw copper that emerged from the smelting process was usually formed into rough ingots or lumps. These early metalworkers had to develop entirely new techniques to transform these chunks of metal into functional tools and beautiful ornaments. Using stone hammers, these ancient artisans would strike the hot copper repeatedly, carefully flattening and shaping it until it took the desired form. This technique, known as hammering or forging, required tremendous skill and patience. Imagine the scene in an ancient workshop from 5,000 years ago. A craftsman sitting by a small fire, periodically heating a piece of copper until it glowed red, then quickly moving it to a flat stone anvil where they would strike it with precise, measured blows. The rhythmic sound of stone against metal would have been a new addition to the soundscape of ancient settlements, a literal percussion of progress. What made copper truly revolutionary was its malleability. Unlike stone, which would shatter when struck, copper would bend and flatten. This property allowed craftsmen to create thin sheets and detailed forms that were simply impossible with previous materials. And perhaps even more remarkably, they discovered that copper became harder and stronger the more it was hammered, a process we now call work hardening. These innovative techniques enabled the creation of tools that transformed daily life. Axes that could fell trees in half the time of stone axes, sharp knives that held their edges better than obsidian, fishhooks that were both strong and thin enough to catch larger prey, and needles so fine they could pierce leather and fabric with ease. Beyond tools, copper brought beauty into the ancient world through decorative objects like necklaces, bracelets, and ceremonial items. In the ruins of ancient Jericho, archaeologists discovered a workshop dating back to around 4,000 years before Christ, containing copper chisels and awls that were used to carve intricate designs into wood and bone. The craftsman who owned these tools was clearly valued in their community. They were buried with their tools, a sign of prestige and importance. One fascinating technique developed in ancient Egypt was called lost wax casting. Artisans would create a detailed wax model, cover it in clay, and then heat it so the wax melted away, leaving a hollow mold. Molten copper was then poured into this mold, creating incredibly detailed figurines and jewelry that would have been impossible to produce through hammering alone. These ancient Egyptians were essentially using the same casting techniques that we still use today, 4,000 years later. Did you know that copper was once more valuable than gold in certain ancient societies? Pretty mind-blowing, right? If you're enjoying this video and these fascinating glimpses into ancient technology, be sure to hit that like button, share it with a friend who loves history, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more incredible stories just like this one. I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well. Drop a comment below telling me what you think was the most important impact of copper metallurgy on human history. Was it the improved tools, the beautiful art, or perhaps the way it changed trade and warfare? Let me know your thoughts, and I might feature some of your responses in our next video exploring ancient technologies. And stick around, because next we're going to look at how the mastery of copper changed entire societies and reshaped the ancient world in ways that still influence us today. The mastery of copper utterly transformed ancient societies in ways that rippled through every aspect of daily life. Imagine the moment when a farmer first used a copper sickle instead of a flint blade to harvest grain. The difference would have been revolutionary. Copper tools could be resharpened, they lasted longer, and they cut more efficiently. These improved agricultural tools allowed for larger harvests, which in turn supported growing populations and eventually led to the first true cities. Construction techniques evolved dramatically as copper chisels, saws, and drills made it possible to shape stone with unprecedented precision. The magnificent temples of ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt simply couldn't have been built without copper tools. When you look at the perfect right angles and smooth surfaces of the Great Pyramid at Giza, completed around 2,500 years before Christ, you're seeing the direct result of copper technology. The stonemasons who created this wonder used copper saws and drills to shape the massive limestone blocks with astonishing accuracy. Perhaps most significantly, copper revolutionized warfare and power dynamics between ancient communities. A copper dagger or spear tip was deadlier than stone or wood, and copper-tipped arrows could penetrate deeper. This technological advantage allowed certain groups to dominate others, leading to the rise of the first empires. Archaeological evidence from sites in the Middle East shows settlements that were clearly conquered by forces with superior copper weapons around 4,000 years before Christ. The ancient Sumerian city of Ur provides a fascinating window into how copper transformed social hierarchies. The famous royal tombs of Ur, dating to around 2,700 years before Christ, contained extraordinary treasures, including copper vessels, weapons, and tools, all symbols of immense wealth and power. The ruling elite controlled access to copper, and by extension, they controlled their society's technological advantage. Copper also revolutionized trade networks. Since copper ore wasn't found everywhere, extensive trade routes developed to connect mining regions with distant settlements. The ancient city of Ebla in Syria, for instance, kept detailed clay tablet records of copper trading operations spanning thousands of miles across the ancient Near East. These trade networks didn't just move metal, they also spread ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. Even art and religion were transformed by copper technology. In ancient Egypt, copper mirrors were considered magical objects that could reflect not just a person's image, but their soul. Priests used polished copper surfaces in religious ceremonies, believing they could glimpse the divine realm in these reflections. Meanwhile, in ancient China, elaborate copper ritual vessels from the Shang dynasty, around 1,700 years before Christ, demonstrate how metalworking became intertwined with spiritual practices. Copper jewelry and decorative objects became powerful symbols of status and wealth. Unlike stone or bone ornaments, copper items could be crafted into intricate shapes with fine details. Archaeologists have found copper crowns, diadems, and ceremonial objects in graves of elite individuals across the ancient world, clear evidence that this metal had acquired profound social significance. The economic systems of entire civilizations were reshaped by copper. In ancient Cyprus, entire communities focused on copper production, creating what might be considered the world's first industrial centers. The demand for copper became so great that specialized workers devoted their entire lives to mining, smelting, or crafting this precious metal, perhaps the first example of specialized industrial labor in human history. Without doubt, copper stands as one of the foundational pillars of early human civilization. This seemingly simple metal set humanity on a technological path that would eventually lead to bronze, iron, and ultimately the modern world we know today. When we look closely at ancient societies before and after the adoption of copper technology, we're looking at two fundamentally different worlds. Copper truly changed everything. The knowledge gained from working with copper opened the gateway to an entirely new world of metallurgy. Think of copper as humanity's first metallurgical teacher, the metal that showed us what was possible when we learned to transform earth into tools. Around 5,000 years ago, an anonymous genius somewhere in the ancient Middle East made a groundbreaking discovery. Mixing copper with tin created a new, harder metal we now call bronze. This wasn't just a small improvement, it was a technological leap so significant that historians named an entire era after it, the Bronze Age. This discovery didn't happen by accident. It came from generations of copper workers experimenting, observing, and passing down their knowledge. Bronze tools and weapons were dramatically stronger than pure copper ones, giving civilizations that mastered this alloy tremendous advantages. The Hittite Empire, which flourished around 1,500 years before Christ, rose to dominance largely because of their advanced bronze weapons and armor. The lessons learned from copper metallurgy directly led to the later discovery of iron working around 3,000 years ago. The same principles of mining, smelting, and forging developed for copper provided the foundation for working with this more challenging metal. Without copper as our first metallic teacher, we might never have unlocked the secrets of iron, which powered civilization for thousands of years. Metallurgy became a sacred art, carefully passed down from master to apprentice across generations. Ancient smiths were often viewed with a mixture of respect and superstition. They possessed what seemed like magical abilities to transform rock into metal. In many ancient cultures, metalworkers formed distinct guilds or castes with their own traditions, rituals, and closely guarded secrets. The Greek god Hephaestus and the Roman Vulcan, both smiths and metalworkers, show how deeply metalworking was woven into the mythological fabric of ancient societies. What's truly remarkable is that copper continues to be absolutely essential in our modern world. Look around you right now. The wiring that brings electricity to your home is made of copper because it's one of the best electrical conductors we've ever discovered. The plumbing that delivers water to your tap likely contains copper because of its natural antimicrobial properties. Even the smartphone or computer you're watching this video on contains copper in its circuitry. Modern pennies and many other coins around the world still contain copper, continuing a tradition of copper coinage that began in ancient Rome around 2,000 years ago. The Statue of Liberty, one of the world's most recognizable monuments, is covered in green copper sheeting, that distinctive color coming from the same natural patina that ancient copper artifacts develop over time. In medicine, copper has found surprising new applications. Researchers have discovered that copper surfaces kill bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens within hours, a property that ancient Egyptians seemed to intuitively understand when they used copper containers to store water and medicinal preparations. Today, some hospitals are installing copper touch surfaces to reduce the spread of infections. Even space exploration relies on copper. NASA and other space agencies use copper in rocket engines, satellites, and Mars rovers because of its excellent conductivity and resistance to extreme conditions. The metal that helped our ancestors leave the Stone Age is now helping us leave our planet. Perhaps the most profound legacy of copper metallurgy isn't the metal itself, but what it taught us, that we could transform our world through technology. That simple realization, that humans could take what nature provided and fundamentally change it through knowledge and skill, represents one of the greatest conceptual leaps our species has ever made. Every technological innovation since, from bronze arrows to smartphones, from iron plows to spacecraft, exists in the long shadow cast by those first copper artisans who looked at a green rock and imagined what it could become. So the next time you flip a penny, turn on a light switch, or use your phone, take a moment to appreciate the legacy of those ancient innovators. Their copper revolution never really ended. It simply evolved into the technological world we know today. The discovery and mastery of copper were far more than just technological advancements. They represented the beginning of humanity's ability to truly transform the world around them. When those first ancient metalworkers realized they could change the very nature of stone through fire and skill, they unlocked something profound in the human experience, the power to reshape our environment rather than simply adapting to it. This copper revolution fundamentally altered ancient societies in ways that continue to echo through history. It changed how people built their homes, grew their food, fought their wars, adorned their bodies, and even how they understood their place in the universe. The technological journey that began with those first copper beads and tools eventually led to the towering achievements of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, and beyond. The story of copper is, in many ways, the story of human ingenuity itself. Those ancient craftspeople who first melted copper ore couldn't possibly have imagined that their discovery would set humanity on a path leading to bronze chariots, iron plowshares, steel skyscrapers, and eventually the sophisticated electronic devices you're using to watch this video. Yet here we are, thousands of years later, still building on their foundational discovery. What I find most fascinating about the copper story is how it reminds us that world-changing innovations often begin with simple observations and experiments. Someone, somewhere, around 10,000 years ago, looked at a strange green rock in a fire pit, and rather than disregarding it, became curious about its transformation. That curiosity, that fundamentally human desire to understand and manipulate the world, is the same force that drives scientific and technological progress today. So the next time you use any metal object, whether it's a simple coin, a kitchen knife, or a sophisticated electronic device, take a moment to appreciate where it all began, with a simple, heated rock thousands of years ago, and the observant human who recognized its potential. I hope this journey through one of humanity's most important technological revolutions has given you a new appreciation for the ingenuity of our ancestors. Their legacy truly lives on in our everyday lives, from the copper wires in your walls to the microprocessors in your devices. If you enjoyed this exploration of ancient technology, please hit that like button, share this video with friends who appreciate history, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel to join us for more fascinating journeys through prehistory. We'll be exploring more ancient innovations that shape the world we know today, from the first domesticated plants to the earliest astronomical observations. What ancient technology would you like to learn about next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. I read everyone, and your idea might inspire our next deep dive into humanity's technological past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video as we continue to uncover the remarkable story of human innovation across the ages.